Are you ready for this? Today, we're going to be talking about vitamins and some mineral deficiencies. Is that right, Robin?
Yeah. Well, I was wanting to talk about some of the basic things that I talk to people about when they come to see me during their first visit, and just essential nutrients for health. And then there are people who are really getting into longevity now. So, how can I live a long life? So these are people who are doing pretty good, right? But they really want to optimize their health. And so there's interesting stuff out there about, okay, what do we need? What studies are showing us that would help us? So there are those people who are just wanting to get by with the bare minimum, right? And then there are those who are like, no, I really want to go all in. So
it reminds me of that Netflix documentary. Have you heard about it? The one about Brian Johnson, who wants to live like the longest life possible.
Oh no.
And so this guy has fashioned his whole life around just living the longest possible life that he can. Yeah. And so every day he takes a load of supplements. Like his entire island is full. He does red light therapy every day. He has that Copacalm thing around his neck for his vagus nerve, for the vagal tone. I mean, it's just like crazy. I feel like you need to watch that. But this man is just like literally insane to this extreme,
It just it's like can be an idol. So that's the thing.
He exercises like 3 hours a day.
And that can be too much. That can be too much of a stressor,
Mm-hmm.
But and that's where it's like, there's got to be God involved in everything to help course correct us, because you can make this an idol. Yeah. And where all of a sudden it's like the thing you're after and the only thing you're focused on is how to live a long time. And it's like, well, what's the goal of living a long time?
Right.
Is it just for that? And is that your God now? Yeah. Or is it because you want to glorify God with your life? Yeah. And if your life is all consumed by just physically being well, you won't have time for anything else. And your eye will be on just that. Yeah. And you're thinking only about yourself. Yeah. And you're not thinking about what's my true purpose in this life. And that's why I think there's this balance that needs to be had.
Yeah. Agreed.
Keeping in front of you, what is my God-given purpose? Why am I here? Yeah. And I don't want people to have their call be cut short because they've totally neglected taking care of their temple. Yeah. And I see that all the time. Yeah. I see people who are not taking care of themselves, and then they fall into chronic disease and sickness and cancer and all this stuff because they were not taking care of themselves. And now all of a sudden God doesn't get to see, and they don't get to see their call and their life finished. Yeah. It's cut short because they totally neglected that. Mm-hmm. And so that's not right either. Right. So we have to have a balance. Don't become so consumed that all you're thinking about is your physical health and what's the right supplement, and I've got to work out this many hours a week, and I've got to do this, and you're all consumed, and now this is your God. You can't go there either. No. And it easily can become that.
And it doesn't always work, Like I think about, a friend that I had that's not with us anymore, but that did everything right. Yeah. And even after like being cancer one time, there was like a stretch of time, between getting cancer again. But during that time, it was like doing like all these homeopathic remedies every 15 minutes, you'd have to take something, and, maybe it did help in extending, those 8 years or whatever, and that's great. If it can like help extend, that's awesome. And I'm super glad for that time. Right. But it's just like a really interesting thing, because you can do like all the supposedly right things and then not, live. And that's where it comes to God, and like him knowing more than we know. Right. But I know your heart in this is like just giving this information so that we can take it and then use it to the best of our ability and take care of us the best that we know how to.
Right. And, and asking God for grace too, and to keep our perspective right. Because that's the key. Yeah. If you have the right perspective, if you're just asking God for grace and to highlight to you what things should I be doing, Lord, in every aspect, taking care of myself physically, mentally and emotionally and spiritually, and letting him be your health coach, then you're going to be on the right path. Absolutely. And all of our paths look different. Yeah. I can just share with you the things that we know, and by no means it should be a pressure that like we have to take this and do all these things. And you have to invite God in to have for every aspect of your life, including this. And some people, you know, if you've had a history where you've got sucked into idolatry when it comes to like trying to do all this stuff, and it can bring you into a weird headspace where all of a sudden, you know, you're just so fixated on doing all this stuff. You're not good for the kingdom anymore. Right? So if that's you, you might just want to like not even listen to the rest of this podcast.
We just see the drop off, right? And it's like, everyone got out quick.
But if you can stay in a healthy place and take this as info, run it through the filter of the Holy Spirit.
That's good.
You know, then great. Keep listening. Because God might have some nuggets for you of adjustment. Right. And that's the hope. And I just want to share with people the things that I think everybody should know. And I just don't want to limit it to just the people who come in to see me.
That's good.
This information's out there, and the body of Christ should have it too.
I love it. Thank you for doing that.
So, okay. So before we talk about nutrients and the need to like optimize our health, I want to address a question I hear in my clinical practice all the time. And this is the question I get. I eat really well. So is it possible that I even have a nutrient deficiency? Can't I just get all of my nutrients from my food? And I think that's a really fair question to ask. But I can tell you from doing a ton of nutrient evaluations, I do blood work and urine work, and I get a 14-page report back telling me what their vitamin, mineral, amino acid, fat status is. I can see all of that. And I've tested so many people who eat well and they're not on any supplementation. And so we're just getting their baseline and they are so deficient in so many things. And so I've done that so many times now that I just say, you know what? I know that we should just start you on this, this, and this. Then we'll do the test. Then we'll see what areas it might be too much or too little, and we'll make our adjustment.
I just want to say, I don't think that the food in America is as nutritionally like sound as it used to be.
You're absolutely right. And so that's the problem is that food that we would eat 100 years ago it was way more nutrient dense than the food we have now. And what's really interesting, I was like, what? I was at a conference and they were talking about like the nitrogen density and stuff in foods, and the organic was doing worse. Yes. I mean, it was just what? So you don't have the pesticides, but then the nutrient density was worse. And it was just like, but you think about a lot of these fruits and vegetables that are grown in like hydroponic gardens and that kind of stuff, right? And they don't have the nutrients we would normally get from soil. And our soil has really been stripped of its nutrients. And we just watched a documentary called The Lunatic Farmer. It's on.
You need to watch that one about dyes, you and I. To die for.
We got a date yet. But on the Angel Network, they have a documentary called The Lunatic Farmer. And it's so good. People should watch that. But it's this Christian man, and he talks about his history of his parents and farming and trying to start up a farm, and like starting on this land that was pretty much like, it was just horrible. And it was in the era of all of the pesticide companies kind of coming out and being like, this is the way. And it was really this time in which you had to choose, like, are you going to embrace the new way of agriculture, or are you going to stick to biblical principles for farming and managing the land? And his dad could see at the time that this was going to build a complete dependence upon fertilizer companies and pesticide and insecticide companies and all of this stuff. And he could just see this is leading to nothing good. And so we are going to stick with this. And it was going against the grain. And so they really figured out a way to move around their animals. They would start the cows in one pasture and they would eat the grass, they would poop, then they would move them out into another one, and then they'd move in the chickens. the chickens would pick through all the cow pies, spread it around, and eat all the larvae and stuff from all the parasites and bugs and all of that stuff, and eat that.
Tasty.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but then it would. So he's like, there's really no smell, no bugs, when this is done right, and all those nutrients would go into the soil. And then they'd have the pigs come through and seeing the pigs and how they stick their snouts out and they're moving the ground around and they're, and he shows what it used to be. And now, like so many decades later, so like they have things growing there that they don't even know what it is, and they believe it's soil from pre-European times, like seeds from pre-European times of this grass seeds that have been dormant in the soil, but couldn't grow in such crappy conditions. And he just talks about their soil content and just shows like how amazing it is now. But it's really fascinating. Yeah. But just learning now what are the density of our food, it really depends upon the density of the soil, and we've totally killed it. And he talks about all of the things that are in soil. There's billions of live things that they don't even know how to name them. We know such a fraction of what is actually living in our soil from a science perspective that we don't even have the knowledge yet of what's all in there.
That's crazy.
And how much of that gets stripped out, and the immunity of our plants and everything else that gets stripped out with all the chemicals we're using and the gene modification and all of that. So you could be doing your best and eating well, but you're at a disadvantage because our food doesn't carry the nutrition it used to.
Yeah.
And so we just need to acknowledge that going in. And I didn't know that initially, so I did tons and tons of tests, and these tests aren't cheap. Yeah. And so after doing so many of them, I still give people the opportunity, like, you can choose, you want to do it, just seeing where you're at now, and then we can go forward. But I just know I've done this enough. Usually I know people need these things, which we'll talk about today. Yeah. And then I'll get them started on that, and then we'll retest and see, okay, was it enough? What tweaks do we need to make? So I thought I'd just share what I've learned. And when I start looking, it's like, oh yeah, everybody's saying the same thing. The people who practice this way see the same. Wow. So, and that what we're really facing right now, what's different now compared to 100 or 150 years ago, is now we live in a state of calorie excess and nutrient deficiency. Yeah. So we're eating way more calories now, yet we are struggling with nutrient insufficiency or deficiency.
I want to go completely off the rails right now and tell you something that Gary told me about yesterday. And it was shocking, and I'd love to talk more about this, like, off air, but I just want to throw this out there because it was completely fascinating. So this guy did an experiment, and he wanted to do a calorie deficit, and he called it the Twinkie diet. And so I was so sick as Gary was telling me about this, but he only ate Twinkies, Doritos, and this like one other thing. I know you look like about as sick as I felt listening to this. And this man, he just wanted to see if limiting his calories would be enough to show significant health markers. And so he did this experiment. He just did this. I don't know how long. And I really do want to talk about this with Gary sometime, because it was just so interesting. But it was so crazy. He went in, and I mean, like, his health on the markers was so much healthier from limiting those like calories. It was just so weird. But like his blood pressure was better.
So he ate crap, but he calorie restricted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and so he lost a lot of weight, right? Okay. Yeah. And so like when he lost that weight, his health became so much better, like on the numbers, like blood pressure, just like everything that they tested.
There's too much.
Isn't that weird?
That you would have to ask. I have so many questions going through my head, because if you ate like 10,000 calories of crap a day and you're really unhealthy than eating 600 calories of crap a day. You're gonna see improvement in your health. Are you gonna be as healthy as me? No, you know what I mean? And if we could maximize that, I mean, it's ridiculous. And the sad thing about it is you can lead people in such a bad direction. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, you have to remember, what is the purpose of food? The purpose of food is to provide us with the nutrients that we need, macro and micronutrients. So our macronutrients being our protein and our fat and our carbs, and then the micronutrients being our vitamins and minerals, and that our cellular machinery.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the cells.
Yeah, cannot function well without it. And so if you deplete yourself of that, your body's going to do the best it can. I'm thinking of like, okay, so if you're going to build a house and you have just the best materials possible, you are going to build like a rock solid house, right? Versus you are just going to the dump and you're grabbing whatever you can, and you can put a house together, but it ain't going to last, and you're going to have a lot of problems. And so that's what happens is our cells are naturally have a cycle of dying, and then we're replacing and making new all the time. And your body has to do that with whatever it's given. And it's going to use, your food is the building blocks. And so if you're putting crap in, then you're really making crappy cells that can function as well as they can, you know what I mean, well, given the circumstances. And people wonder, why do I have brain fog? Why am I gaining weight around the middle? Why am I so tired all the time? Why do I have aches and pains? Why do I have this rash? Why do I, you know, like all the things. And it's going, well, are you giving your body what it needs in order to thrive? And that's part of the equation. Not all the equation, but you'd have to know so much about that man's life ahead of him doing this quote unquote experiment to know, well, why did he have improvements? How bad off was this guy before he even started? You know what I mean? Like, that's ridiculous. Cause you know, I couldn't even spend one day like that. I'd be paying the price.
I know, me too.
I would feel horrible. I don't care if it was just 600 calories. You would just feel so horrible.
I agree.
So anyway, that was a Pandora's box. But so, you know, let's think about the early 1900s when there was food scarcity, or even in the Great Depression, right? And people were really thin and literally wasting away, and they had nutrient deficiencies that were really severe. And so we think of that normally in our mind, but we don't really see that anymore, because now we have easy access to food, but it's crap food and it has no nutrition in it. So, and the people who are struggling the most financially are going to buy the cheapest food, and the cheapest food is going to be the least nutrient dense, and they're going to eat a lot of it because it doesn't fill you up, and because it's just like, some people have heard of the condition called pica. Pica is, you'll see it when people are really iron deficient. And all of a sudden they start craving things that aren't even food. They'll want to eat dirt. And that's because their body is so intensely trying to seek out getting that nutrient. And so it can be a sign, or they'll eat ice or weird stuff, like they just can't stop eating ice, and they're iron deficient. And it's a different low grade, you know, but we continue to eat. There were studies looking at calorie comparison, taking one group, they couldn't leave this building, right? They watched every calorie they took in. First 2 weeks, they give them all the highly processed foods, and it let them eat however much they wanted. All they were doing was looking at how many calories are they taking in. And then they took the same group then, and for 2 weeks they gave them whole food, only real food, and they could eat as much as they wanted. And then all they did is they just watched very closely to see how many calories did they take in, and they took in on average 500 calories less a day. That's 2 pounds a week. Or I think it's 1 pound a week, so 2 pounds during that 2 week time. And So it fills you up more, but it's also more nutrient dense. Mm-hmm. So if your body is saying, I still am running out of building blocks, I don't have what I need in order to make this new cell I need to make or make it run well, it's going to send the signals that have you out searching. Mm-hmm. And so then you just keep eating more. Mm-hmm. And so you'll eat more to try to fill that void when really your body just needs the nutrients. And so that's the conundrum we are in right now, is we're looking at a society that's overweight or obese. Mm-hmm. And we go, well, they couldn't possibly be nutrient deficient because they eat too much. Mm-hmm. But the sad reality is they are, and that most of us are in a state of nutrient insufficiency. It's mm-hmm. not like although I do see that too, it might not be the severe deficiency, but it's insufficient. And that leads to chronic disease. And so we'll talk about that too a little bit. But there's one person, Bruce Ames, if people are interested in this, he's a really great scientist. Like if you want to, he passed away a couple years ago now. If you wanted to look into research studies, he did so much in advancing our understanding of how does nutrition impact us from a chronic disease perspective and longevity. But he came up with this nutrient triage theory that says nutrient shortages can lead to the redistribution of nutrients to critical short-term functions at the expense of long-term health, and that can accelerate aging. So one example I think is helpful to just kind of show like, well, what does this mean in everyday life? So magnesium is a really good one. So magnesium is used in like 300 different reactions in the body.
Wow.
And so it's really
insane.
Yeah. It's really important in so many different areas. One is just the production of energy in ATP for your cell to run. And one other one is DNA repair. And so every time your cell replicates and makes a new one, there's always little errors that happen. And so our body comes in and fixes those errors. If they don't, you have all these errors happening, you can make a cancerous cell. All of a sudden it's gone rogue, and we've got these genes that are not replicating right, and they have errors in them, and it can cause problems. So magnesium is needed in that process of DNA repair. But his theory that he was seeing in his studies was that the body will preferentially use the magnesium to produce energy because that's what you need right now.
Right.
For you to survive, you need to make energy production. So it's going to prioritize that. So if you have a shortage of magnesium, then you probably aren't going to make the DNA repairs that you need. And in the long run, you'll be at increased risk then for things like cancer or chronic disease because you've had an insufficiency.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think it's helpful to know that, and that in the health community, one thing that doctors, I can say from personal experience, we do not know anything about what the ideal amount is for nutrients and how to even advise our patients on how much they need and how that varies from person to person. So when you're under stress, whether it's psychological or physical, you go through more magnesium. And so your needs are going to go up. So then that need changes. So you have to adjust and you have to make sure you're getting more magnesium and be able to look for the signs of magnesium deficiency and follow those, right? And I think about vitamin D is another great example. So you go to the lab and you have your lab drawn to see, which again, the traditional system does not check vitamin D levels very often. And then the lab value will say that 30 is normal. If you're at 30, you're fine. But we know by looking at studies that 55 to 80 is really that range you want to be in. And most traditional doctors are told to freak out, like, oh no, they're toxic and too high, but they really don't know. Like, okay, show me the studies that tell me that that's toxic and too high. And they don't know. That's just what they've been told. Really, unless you have a strong history of kidney stones, you don't want to get too crazy with your vitamin D. And they have to be calcium-based stones. But if you're if you're doing it right and you aim for that, they had 0 mortality rate in people who got COVID if their vitamin D was over 55.
Wow.
And it's so critical for your immune system function.
That's crazy.
And was the government telling us to make sure everybody run out, check your vitamin D levels and take vitamin D? No, they were not.
I was going to say, I'm like, I don't think so.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But so then you have to know, well, what's the ideal level? And what that is, like how much people need to take to get to that level varies from person to person. And even our own metabolism of vitamin D it varies, and that can be genetically set. Or even based on your gut. Now, while you're absorbing your fat-soluble vitamins, do you have a gallbladder anymore because you need bile? There's so many things that impact that. So you can't just say, everybody should be great. If you take 5,000 IUs a day, you're good. So you have to know the nuances. You have to check labs. And you have to know that getting a vitamin, and it says, oh, this meets 100% of the recommended daily allowance, that means nothing.
Yeah.
So when they came up with those levels, that just meant you're not likely going to get rickets if you have 800 IUs per day of vitamin D.
What if, you said that people should go out, they should get their blood work done. Would you recommend that they just go to their doctors, at their next physical and say like, hey, I would like to get this tested. It's something I've been thinking about, or...
Yeah, you can. Vitamin D will be a little easier than some of the other things that I recommend for people. Okay. And even if they have a doctor who is willing, sometimes it's an insurance issue. And so they'll say, well, I just can't guarantee your insurance is going to cover it. And so then you'll have to kind of eat that cost. And that's where I talk to people. You have to be kind of savvy, and you want to look into, well, what do they charge for their labs? How much is this going to cost you to have that done if insurance doesn't cover it? And then just know that there are other labs out there that will do cash pay. And they don't they charge maybe a quarter of the same for the same lab that you would get if you went to a health system. So it might be better off just paying out of pocket because you'll pay less. So it helps to know that and be willing to do a little bit of homework to know, okay, what's it going to cost if I have it done here versus here, and figure out the best way to do it. But I do think it's nice for people to be empowered, because these cash pay clinics, a lot of times you don't need a doctor's order. You can go in and just be like, yep, I'd like this, this, and this, and then they'll draw it for you. And you don't need to have a doctor's order for it. Because you're not running it through insurance. And
that's cool.
So you don't need to have a quote unquote diagnosis or whatever. You can just get it done. And in other countries, that's how it is. And even other states. It varies from state to state. We go down to Arizona, you can go to a lot of labs down there and just tell them what you want. So so it really varies depending on where you're at, even in this nation.
Wow, interesting.
So so people just need to know that, but they need to be empowered to be able to take this into their own hands. You know what I mean? So
that's good.
So I wonder if people would be interested in even knowing, like, what are the signs of magnesium deficiency, or maybe we should talk about magnesium. It's interesting. Both you and I have been short in magnesium recently, I think, because of stress. Even on the drive over here, I almost asked you for some magnesium because I forgot to take it this morning. My little eye was twitching. And so
I've been having that too.
So magnesium is like towards the top as far as things that I recommend for people, because it depends on what study you look at, but somewhere between 50 to 60% of the population is magnesium deficient. And what's hard is there's different ways to measure magnesium. So if you really want to know what your magnesium level is, you want to check what they call an RBC magnesium, not just a serum level. The serum level does not really change very much unless you have kidney disease. And what we're looking for is how much magnesium is actually inside the cell, not just floating around in the serum part of the blood. So when we check an RBC, that stands for red blood cell, what's inside of the red blood cell. And not all labs will do that for you, but that's the best way to really know if you're magnesium deficient or not. And so that nutrient evaluation that I have done, it'll check that.
Okay.
But then you can kind of know where am I at. But if you don't even want to have a lab done, I mean, there's some signs you can look for. So muscle twitching. So, and when you're stressed, I mean, that's always a joke, right? That people are having these little eye twitches and stuff because they're like spazzing out, but it's a real thing. So you have too much stress going on, whether that's physical or psychological. You'll get these random little muscle twitches. I was having one in my thigh the other day. This eye keeps doing that to me recently, and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to.
Mine's shifted the other day to another eye. I was like, why are you doing that? I'm not used to you doing that.
And so I'm like, okay, now I've just got to make sure I got to up it,
Yeah.
And so muscle twitches, muscle cramping, headaches.
That's interesting.
Yep, headaches. Taking magnesium can even help with menstrual cramps to lessen them. So that's a good thing for people to know. Constipation, palpitations, anxiety, all of those can come. And even this was an interesting one, sensitivity to loud noises, which is normally a trigger for me. So if I'm becoming more easily triggered in that, I'm like, it's another wake up call that, okay, I'm probably stressed and my magnesium's getting burned up. So I need to increase that. So, and even it can impact blood pressure.
Wow.
So making sure that our magnesium is adequate. So foods that we should think about for magnesium. So leafy greens, especially spinach. I like throwing that one in smoothies. You really don't even taste it. And if I have like a bag that's like almost going to go bad and I know we're not going to eat it in time, I'll throw it in the freezer. And then it just freezes. Yep. And then I can just put it in my smoothies.
That's smart.
So that's a nice way to not throw them away and still use them. Beans, especially lima beans.
Oh.
And then nuts and pumpkin seeds are really high, which I thought was interesting. I just started buying them in the last couple of years more consistently because I love having them on salads. And so I'll throw pumpkin seeds, or pepitas, the other name. I'll throw those on my salads. I didn't realize they're really high in magnesium. So I'm like, ooh, that's great. That's a bonus. The other thing that people should know is that there's different types of magnesium. So I eat a lot of these foods, but still, I guess it's not enough for me, obviously. So I take it in a supplement form, and I'll even vary the type that I take because there's different types of magnesium. So magnesium, and you don't want to take like magnesium oxide, or there's different types that are just not well absorbed. And so you think about like the milk of magnesia or those kinds, like those are not. If you want to get your magnesium up, it's good for a colon cleanse, but that's about all it's good for. And sadly, when you go to the hospital and you're giving people the type of magnesium they'll give people to bump up their magnesium is not the kind that is well absorbed. It's just so sad. But magnesium citrate is one that is a go-to for people who are having constipation. That one really helps move the bowels. But if you don't have bowel issues and you're trying to repair your magnesium load, it might cause diarrhea. So you got to watch that. So then you might want to go to one like magnesium malate. That one's really great for cramps, for muscle soreness, and just to promote relaxation, or if you're having those muscle twitches. Magnesium threonate crosses the blood-brain barrier. That one can really help with mood, sleep, calming, relaxation. A lot of times I'll have people take that one, especially in the evening. It's good for energy and cognition too. And then magnesium glycinate, that one I think of, that one's kind of a nice one because it's for muscles, but also for nerves, relaxation, digestion. So that one, if people are like, I just want an easy one, I don't have to remember all these types, glycinate's not a bad go-to. But if people are really struggling in the like mood or anxiety or sleep, I usually have them do the magnesium threonate. And then it's not uncommon for me to blend them, where I'll be like, here, I want you to take this kind and I want you to do this kind, because we're trying to get like all of these benefits right now. Does that make sense? So magnesium's a big one. We talked about vitamin D. So that's another one that I put people on. A third one for kind of all comers that come in is omega-3. And that comes from fatty acids from fish.
At remembering to take that sometimes.
I know. I have to say, it's probably my least favorite one to do. Because if you're going to take it in a capsule, they're pretty big. And
they are.
Unless you can get smaller ones, but it just means you're taking a lot of them. So you can get pill fatigue, which is a real thing, you know? And so it's probably the one that I have a liquid, which I like, but then you have to remember to take it because it's in the fridge.
Exactly.
So,
that's the problem.
So I get it. I struggle with that too. So we have to help each other at home and remember, because there's some of us that will do the capsule and I go back and forth. So, but omega-3s are really important. There's different types that come from different sources. So there's the alpha-linolenic acid, which is ALA, that comes from like walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds. So my vegans tend to do that. And the only bummer is the most therapeutic form of omega-3s tend to come from EPA and DHA. And you'd have to trust that your body is converting ALA into those forms. And and it really depends on a lot of things, because those enzymes are genetically set. Some people, those enzymes are very slow, don't work very well. But they also, those enzymes are dependent upon other micronutrients. So you've got to be very B sufficient and like all these other ducks have to line up nutritionally for that to work. So I've tested vegans and they're like, no, I've been told it'll convert. And I'm like, okay, let's just test and see. Is it doing the job? And then they see like, oh, it's not doing what it was supposed to do. So the good news is you can use algae forms of DHA and EPA. So you can do that. I still think the most potent forms will come from fish or krill is another good source. But again, that's animal based. But the EPA and DHA are definitely the ones that you want to go after. Get a fish oil or omega-3 supplement. Look at the back, because it'll usually tell you total amount of omega-3s. And then underneath that, they'll tell you how much EPA and how much DHA. That's the part that you want to know. Because if you're getting, let's say, 1,000, but only 500 of that is from EPA and DHA, I would say it's not great, because half of that's kind of like not therapeutic. So the higher the amounts of those, the better. And ideally, you'd probably have closer to a ratio of 1-to-1 between those two, between EPA and DHA. But it's hard to find that. DHA was really helpful for the brain and crosses the blood-brain barrier better and really helps decrease inflammation here in the brain. And a lot of us are needing that. And so I'm usually trying to get people to do one that's a little higher in DHA, but again, they're a little harder to find. So if I can just get their omega-3s up, that's a win. But it's really critical for cell membrane health, and that's where most of, as we age, that's what gets attacked. I mean, if you think about the cell of our body representing that house that we're trying to build, it's the exterior of the house. And as the storms come through in life, what's going to get beat up the most? It's going to be the outside. Yes. So it's the cell membrane that we need to take care of. And that is really what's driving the health of our body, is a lot of times that, because if that's intact and doing well, it protects the inside. Most of the reactions that are happening between the outside world into the cell, it's all about the health of the membrane and all these little channels on the membrane that let things in or out. And if that's all beat up, it's like this fortress does not have a wall protecting it anymore. Does that make sense? And so if that wall is made up of fat, which is what it is, that means no fat-free diets, right? That's a thing in the 90s that did us wrong. Okay, no fat-free diets. Now, what kind of fat? Okay, what kind of fat are we building? So what's, again, back to the house analogy, what are we building the exterior of our house with? Is it crap or is it good quality, right?
Crisco.
Yes. Amen.
Crisco or avocado.
So the bad oils, which this is what I grew up with, right? We didn't know any better. Man, I remember making all kinds of cookies with Crisco. And, not good.
It's a staple.
So the seed oils, which Crisco is made from cottonseed oil. It is a waste product that was made into an oil to make people money and for us to not do well with, right? I mean, it's a toxin. So vegetable oil, canola oil, all of these are toxins to our body. It's literally giving our body really poor ingredients to make cells with, and it promotes inflammation in our body. So we need to not use those fats. And I'm sorry to say, almost every restaurant that you go to is going to use those oils because they're cheap.
Yeah.
So they're going to use those oils to make all the food. So even if it's quote unquote okay food, if any oil was involved, it is going to be bad oils. So people need to understand that. Yeah. And any processed food, cracker, well, you name it, that you buy, chips, unless you specifically look, most of them, I would say 95% of them on the shelf are going to be made with these bad oils. So when our body goes to work trying to make a new cell, it's going to use whatever we gave it. And unfortunately, in the American diet, it is largely these omega-6 oils, which are these seed oils, which are very toxic to us. So the way we combat that is we make sure we supplement with omega-3 unless you eat an insane amount of fish. and it has to be omega-3 heavy fish. So it's going to be salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, that kind of thing. And a lot of people don't eat those on a regular basis. But if you can switch that.
I love it. I love salmon. It's just so expensive.
I know.
Like River, if I gave her salmon every single day for the rest of her life, she'd be the happiest little girl in the world. She just absolutely loves salmon, but my wallet doesn't.
I know. It's so hard. And then you want it to be wild caught, which is even more expensive. And so it is. It's hard. And you have a family of 5.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we can't do this every night.
Right.
So it's, I mean, if ideally to get enough omega-3s, you'd be eating salmon probably 3 times a week, which is not for most folks. Yeah. So that's why it's like most of us need to supplement. And so there is a way to even measure, am I getting enough? There's something called an omega-3 index. And it's pretty interesting when you start looking at the health, like looking at outcomes of omega-3 index of like, what does it mean outcome-wise for people? And when you compare nations, that was kind of scary. So looking at the U.S., our average omega-3 index is 4.
Wow.
And the goal is to get to 8. And Japan's at 10 on average. I was like, oh man.
I could have predicted that.
So with an omega-3 index level of 8 or higher, you experience a 5-year increase in life expectancy compared to somebody at 4%.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And one study found that for every 1% increase, so they measure this in percent. So our U.S. average is 4%.
Okay.
And so for every 1% increase in omega-3 index, there's a 20% decrease in mortality. That's pretty huge.
Yeah, very.
And it's also important to know that it's not just for adult brains health. We were talking earlier about how important it is for brain health and inflammation, but also babies and children. So they did a study looking at babies in utero and in growing children. And the higher the amount of omega-3s, they showed a correlation with higher IQ levels. So it's definitely something if you're pregnant or even for littles, like we should be supplementing our little ones with this.
And I just want to throw out there, the liquid one is great for kids.
Yes.
Like River loves that mango peach one.
Yeah.
They don't have it anymore at
Sparrow.
Yeah.
There is a way to get it though, online, but there's an even better one that I like now.
Okay.
I'll share that with you.
Yeah, you'll have to, because I found the Barleans brand on Walmart. Yeah, I found that. They have a mango peach smoothie one.
It's essentially the same.
Okay.
Essentially the same.
Okay.
The only bummer is when you look at the ingredients, it does have like gums and different things added to it that I'm not a huge fan of because it can be hard on the gut.
Yeah.
So I found another one. It is a little spendy though, but it's highly concentrated. So you get like 1,500 milligrams in a teaspoon.
Oh, wow.
And it has zero fish taste to it at all. It only tastes like lemon.
Oh, wow.
And so, but it's a little more spendy, but that is a nice one. We can maybe put that in the notes for people who are interested in.
That'd be good.
Yeah, and I'll share that with you too.
Although River would be disappointed because she loves like those big spoonfuls of like mango peach smoothie.
So it might be worth
like a treat.
Risk-benefit ratio, you know, maybe it's worth it.
If I gave her a teaspoon, she'd be like,
more. Yeah, I know. So yeah, so then you wonder about like, well, what's the right amount? So for most people, the right amount, like the average person, it's 1,000 adult, I should say, it's 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA twice a day.
Okay.
So 2,000 milligrams a day. If you have chronic disease, you know there's inflammation in your body, then it's up to 4,000.
Oh, wow.
I use it milligrams a day. So I'll do 2 and 2, like 2 with breakfast, 2 with supper. Yeah. So I know if I'm going through like inflammation or concussion. I've had 2 children with concussions recently. We've done really, really high levels, like 6,000 a day for a while, just to help their brain heal. Yeah. So yeah. But anyway, start just in general, most people 1,000 milligrams twice a day. Okay. Again, talk to your doctor. I'm not your doctor, or maybe for some people I am, but this is not me like prescribing. I'm just sharing with you like what for most people works. But everybody's got a different clinical situation. So you need to figure that out with a provider who actually knows this kind of medicine and knows you. Yeah. But I'm just sharing with what works for most people.
Yeah, that's good.
And then measuring, right? That's where labs are helpful.
Yes.
You don't know unless you test. Right. And some people, to get their omega-3 index up, have to do way higher doses. So we don't know until we look. Yeah. So when it comes to inflammation, omega-3s and exercise are the most influential factors when it comes to negating inflammation. So just keep that in mind. Most people don't realize that. And so many people think about joints and arthritis when it comes to inflammation, but we need to keep in mind the brain gets inflamed too. So EPA and DHA are especially helpful for inflammation in the brain, has been shown to help even decrease depression symptom severity when just dosed between that 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day. Wow. So, and the quality of your supplement really matters.
It really does.
So we know that unfortunately our fish in our waters carry a ton of toxins because our water is so toxic, including heavy metals. Fish is a huge source of mercury and other heavy metals and just toxins in general. Yeah. So if you are just working with an average supplement company that's not doing their due diligence to purify and then have third-party testing to make sure that those contaminants are taken out, you can actually do more harm than good. So just be mindful of that. Make sure that you're using a good company.
That's a huge statement. You could do more harm than good.
Yeah.
You know, like that's scary, isn't it? And people think they're like, oh, I'm doing my fish oil, you know, and it's actually doing irrevocable harm or whatever.
I know. And I get it, because people are like, well, I want to do the right thing. Yeah. I don't have the money. So I'm just going to go to Walmart and I'm just going to get the whatever Equate brand or whatever. And I'm like,
Nature's Bounty and Centrum.
No. A lot of times you're not even absorbing those highly compressed tablets and stuff. It's just like, oh, you're just wasting your money.
Just flushing it down the toilet. So might as well just put them right in the toilet.
Right. And flush. You know, it's real. They did kind of a look at going to like an average even GNC and kind of pulling stuff off the shelf and checking it to see it's it match what's on the label. Yeah. And a lot of them did not match up. And so it is a racket out there. So that's why it's like the better companies spend the money to actually have the third-party testing to validate. And actually they do testing to make sure the ingredients they are getting are pure. Then they have a third-party company come in to check and make sure and validate that what they say on the label is actually there. But then that all costs money to do.
Absolutely.
So then they cost more. And so that's the hard part. And I'm not saying, you know, it's easy. So you just have to figure out, okay, if I'm going to do this, what am I going to do? You know, and I would say getting your vitamin D it's not expensive. Doing vitamin D. And the other thing I didn't say about vitamin D, you want to get D3 and you want to make sure that you're taking it with vitamin K too. And because vitamin D really helps bring in calcium from the gut, from your food and everything else, but then it just floats around in your bloodstream. And then it can actually calcify your blood vessels, which leads to cardiovascular disease and hardening of the arteries. You don't want that. So K2 is what's needed acid to get the calcium into your bones. And so you need to make sure you take vitamin D with K2 and then also with magnesium. All those things are needed for optimized bone health, immune health. So you got to make sure that those are all there. But I usually start out people with vitamin D3, K2, a fish oil, and then the other thing is a good quality multivitamin.
Yeah.
If you can do those things and not even bother with like all the other stuff, you're way ahead of the game.
Yeah.
But make sure, and so what do you like, well, it's in a good quality multivitamin, right? That's usually the next question I get.
Yeah.
And basic things I would tell people is you don't want to buy one that just has 100% down the line of the recommended daily allowance, right? Because usually people look at that and they're deceived and thinking, oh, good, it's got my max that I need. But again, that's to prevent severe disease of insufficiency. It's not actually optimizing your health and what your body actually needs.
That's interesting.
A lot of the ones actually, so those other companies, they've actually paid attention and they know, like, okay, what's the ideal amount for these different B vitamins and vitamin A's and all of that. And so it's going to look like insane amounts. Some of them are like, 10,000% of the, you know what I mean? But a lot of people actually need that, especially when it comes to like B12 or those kinds of things. So I look at the right amount. The other thing I look for is, especially when it comes to B vitamins, B9 and B12, are they methylated? And that will just simplify it. It just means the body doesn't have to work as hard to make it into the active form. Okay. It's ready to be used by the body. Some people actually have a genetic issue with taking in B vitamins and making them in a form that the body can use. Okay. So they could be taking in high amounts of folic acid, but they can't actually turn it into something that's usable. So the body is looking like it's deficient, yet you're taking in these high amounts of folic acid. Wow. We have to turn it into methylfolate. And so if you are taking it in that form, methylfolate or methylcobalamin, which is B12, the body can just take it and put it to work right away. So I look for that. I look for what form of vitamin A it is. So there's just different things I look for. So good quality multivitamin. Make sure you're getting your fish oil. Make sure you're getting vitamin D3 with K2. And then if you can add magnesium, most people are better off for that. Yeah. So I could go on with so much more, but I feel like those are probably the most important things that people need to know. And that'll get them started. Maybe in another talk, we could talk about Bruce Ames more because he, in 2018, it was like 2 years before he died. He was 95 when he died. Wow. And he was still doing research papers at like 93. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. But he put out a study looking at longevity and like the crucial nutrients he saw people needed if they really wanted longevity. So maybe in the future we could dive into that a little bit more. Yeah. Like what were the things that he found were critical for longevity? Does that sound okay?
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
So, well, Lord, we just thank you. I just pray that people take this as like just nuggets of information, no pressure. Yeah. And I just pray, God, that you would help people see, if there are any areas in this talk that you want them to act on and that you would help them. And we'll provide maybe some links to places where you can, like, so for transformingthetemple.com, we now are working with a really reputable supplement company, Orthomolecular, so you can get supplements there and you would know that they are good quality. Absolutely. So we can take some of that guesswork out of there for you. And what we'll probably do is create like a 10% discount code.
Oh, that'd be great.
For the podcast.
That's awesome.
And so we can put that in the little link. So definitely. So we can maybe just say Kingdom 20. Or I'm sorry, Kingdom 10.
Yeah.
So we'll do Kingdom 10 and you can put that in for the discount code and then it'll give you 10% off of your order for our podcast listeners. But if you go to transformingthetemple.com And then we have got a little store there. You can click there.
Yeah.
And then we've got different supplements there. You can find, we've got a couple different multivitamins. We've got a couple different ways you can take vitamin D3. We've got my favorite fish oil there. So if people want, they can check that out.
For the discount code, will that be all lowercase then for them? Kingdom 10, all lowercase? Okay.
Yep. Kingdom 10. Yeah. Awesome. So we can do that. So that'll maybe take some of the guesswork out for people. We have a magnesium there. So so that'll be easy. But Lord, I just pray that you guide people, help people know, like, what is it that you're leading them to do, even eating differently, God. I pray you'd speak to people and just show them if there's little tweaks you want them to make and how they're eating, and giving them the grace to do it. No, there's no pressure, no condemnation, there's no shame, there's only tomorrow. And what do you want them to do? Adjustments you want them to make. And I pray that you would bless them, make it easier for them, Lord, to kind of embrace the things that you're calling them to do, one little change at a time. And we just thank you for it, God, in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. If you liked what you heard, make sure you share it with your friends, and also subscribe so when we do release a new episode, you will be the first to know it.
And please be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook. We also have a new Facebook group where you guys can come in and dive into conversation with us, ask us questions. So we would love to see you there as well.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you there.